Hello and welcome to Beyond Reproach. This is Stephanie Domingo.
And Tux Lerzel.
I come to you from Medellin, Colombia, where I'm recording on land belonging to the Carina people.
Oh, fancy.
Yeah.
And I am coming to you from Detroit, Michigan, where I record on land belonging to the Ottawa, Potawatomi, Wyandot, and Ojibwe nations.
These are some of many nations that are still very much out here doing their thing, and we would like to acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the show about scandals and scandalousness in American politics and government. But
yes.
Since this is a mini, we don't got no format. We're talking about whatever.
Yeah, so last week we had Rachel and Leah here from #History to talk about the Ford Pinto, the scandalous story of the Ford Pinto. And as horrific and depressing and terrible as that story was, some of the most shocking details about that story, to me at least, were the facts that A, the Pinto passed government safety standards without issue, despite the glaringly problematic location of the fuel tank, and B, that the Pinto wasn't even that much more dangerous than other subcompact cars on the market at the time.
That was the most shocking to me.
Yeah.
That was like industry standard and everyone was doing it.
Totally.
With that
it just
model.
had like a bad reputation because of a few, unfortunate incidents. But like that bad shit was happening to anyone in a subcompact car. It's really fucked up. But so that story got me kind of thinking about the government's role in auto safety.
Okay.
So today I'm going to be talking about the history of seatbelt laws.
Oh, okay, cool. Cool. What's his face was involved with that? The guy who ran for president? I know, yeah.
The guy who ran for president.
You know, the man who...
Oh, Nader.
Right. Yeah, Nader.
Yes, he definitely did have a lot to do with...
Are you talking about his role?
I'm not, actually, because what his influence... He had more to do with making it mandatory for cars to offer safety belts than he did with the enforcement of people wearing them.
Oh,
there's sort of two different things going on here. And I will be talking about the laws involved in making auto manufacturers offer seatbelts or like required seatbelts in cars, but that's not really the main part of what I'm talking about. Nader did come up in my research, but I chopped him out because this is a mini and I'm trying to keep it short today.
Yeah.
This could definitely have been a full episode. There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here today.
When I was a kid at school learning the golden rule, teacher often used to say, if you don't tell a lie, there's not a reason why you can't be like Washington someday. How could Washington be a married man and never tell a lie?
It's hard to even imagine getting into a car today and not like automatically reaching for a seatbelt, sort of just instinctively. But that has not always been the case at all. And the reasons that seatbelts are so commonly used today are much more complicated and much stupider than you might think.
Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds like us.
I know, yes. So
complicated and stupid.
If Americans are anything, it is complicated and stupid.
Yeah.
So seatbelts and safety harnesses have been around since the 19th century, but it wasn't until 1949 that a Wisconsin-based auto manufacturer called Nash Motors became the first company to ever offer lap belts in cars. But most people at the time opted not to use them. And since they were an option rather than a standard feature, most buyers didn't even bother purchasing them at the time. In 1956, only 2% of Ford buyers took the $27 seatbelt option.
Okay. Wow. No one.
Yeah, 2%. But almost immediately after seatbelts started popping up in cars, the world erupted into a heated debate over their value and usefulness.
Okay.
People didn't want to believe that it was necessary to wear them, despite the fact that scientific research throughout the 1950s proved that they saved lives.
I love that you think that we care about scientific research.
I know. Yes. Yeah.
Given what you know about American history.
Well, I'm not going to really like specifically talk about this, but there's plenty of opportunity to tie this into what's going on in the world today with vaccine mandates and mask mandates and that kind of thing. Like there's such close correlations. So feel free to point those out when you see them, because it's like this whole story is basically just a metaphor for mask mandates and vaccine mandates.
Yeah, I'm already feeling that right now. I'm like, this is about to be some shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Most people at the time just thought that seatbelts were inconvenient and uncomfortable.
Oh no, it's already starting. Okay.
Yes.
They couldn't breathe, perhaps?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it didn't take long for people to come up with quasi-scientific sounding arguments against seatbelts. They claimed that seatbelts could cause internal injuries during a collision, and that they could delay or prevent people from escaping from cars submerged in water or engulfed in flames. But these arguments were quickly debunked by researchers, but that did not stop people from repeating them as if they were scientific fact.
Yes.
This was before QAnon, but no big deal.
And yet,
yeah, here we are.
It's the same thread.
Yeah. Then in the late 1950s, seatbelts got even safer when an engineer at Volvo devised a 3-point.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but like, were they ever dangerous? You said when they got safer.
No, they weren't dangerous, but they were not as effective as they are now, because before they just were lap belts. They just literally held you in at the waist.
Yeah.
And then in the late 1950s, an engineer at Volvo devised the 3-point safety belt that we know today that also secures your chest as well as your waist.
Okay.
That didn't happen until the late 50s.
Okay.
And this new model proved that wearing their new safety belt could reduce car crash mortality by 50% or more. They were using crash test dummies and the same kind of testing that we do today. And they're like, yeah, safety belts totally save lives.
Save lives, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's easy to get out of a seatbelt. Like if your car, if your car goes into the water, you just press a button and you're out.
People act like they're handcuffed to the seat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, but so people still weren't convinced, and they continued to argue that seatbelts were unnecessary and uncomfortable, and that the decision to use a seatbelt should be a personal one rather than a legal one.
Yes, get the government out of my car.
Yes, exactly. My body, my choice. And so newspapers started carrying stories about protesters loudly proclaiming their right to self-determination, and people lamenting the rise of the nanny state.
Like, really, guys, this is the hill. But yeah, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
This is
don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do. Yeah.
Unless you're a woman and then I tell you what to do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So in 1961, Wisconsin became the first state to require seatbelts in the front seats of cars built after 1962. And then in 1968, seatbelt requirements became federal law. And this is, as you mentioned, thanks to the help of Ralph Nader. But this new law only made it mandatory for manufacturers to install seatbelts in their cars. It was still up to individual drivers whether or not that they would wear them. And many drivers actually started cutting the seatbelts out of their cars in protest.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
once they
so stupid.
Yeah, I know. Once they automatically came in the car and they didn't have an option, they're like, no, I'm cutting it out because I'm not going to wear this. I refuse.
Yeah, I was actually in an Uber this morning, coming to this co-working spot, and the driver I guess the seatbelt was too uncomfortable, so he had it like behind his back, but he saw a cop and like put it in.
Oh my god!
Over him real quick. It was very funny.
Oh my god!
You're silly.
Yeah, that's funny that happened to you today too.
Yeah, today.
Yeah. So little by little, states started passing laws requiring that people actually wear their seatbelts, but most states didn't do much to actually enforce these new laws. And even though the laws were really loosely enforced, the more states that started passing them, the more like
Protest.
strongly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Public resistance was like, people were pissed.
Yeah.
In 1982, when a Michigan state representative introduced a new seatbelt law, he received hate mail in the mail comparing him to Hitler.
Stop it.
Yes, because like preventing someone from dying in a fiery car crash is exactly the same as sending them to the gas chamber. It is literally the same thing.
Wow. The fact that this person got out a piece of paper, got out a pen, got a stamp,
Put
all
a
these
stamp on it,
steps,
yeah.
like,
Licked the stamp.
and
It
like
was the
read
80s.
what he wrote, because it was a he, read what he wrote, and is like, yes, this is my Holocaust. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
man.
exactly. Yeah. This is exactly the same as being sent to a death camp.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So even as late as the early 1980s, only 14% of Americans reported using their seatbelts regularly.
Really?
Yeah.
Like the end of the 80s?
The early
So
80s.
early
In
80s.
the early
14%.
80s, 14% of Americans were using them regularly. But
Okay.
since the 80s, resistance to seatbelts has basically disappeared. By 2010, 85% of drivers said that they use a seatbelt regularly. And by 2019, that number was up to 91%.
Okay.
So what the hell changed? What
Yeah, I was
happened?
just gonna ask.
Yeah.
That's drastic.
Yeah.
That's night and day.
Yeah. Well, basically, in the mid-1980s, states suddenly started passing much stricter seatbelt laws and actually started enforcing these laws much more aggressively in the mid-1980s. So basically, people only started actually buckling up and getting into the habit of buckling up because they were afraid of getting a ticket, not because they were afraid of dying in a car accident.
Wow.
Yeah.
The ticket.
Yes.
The $40 ticket, but your life, okay.
Yeah, no big deal. Yeah. But so then that also begs the question, what the hell happened in the mid 80s that made all of these states suddenly start passing and enforcing these stricter seatbelt safety laws? That we will find out after a short break.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Welcome to Hashtag History. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Leah. And if you're a history nerd,
Or even a history hater,
this is the podcast for you.
even if history was your least favorite subject in school, we can guarantee you will like this podcast because we talk about all the things that your history textbooks did not.
Things like how the Bonnie Prince Charles and his Jacobite uprising was a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, or how the pharaoh Akhenaten was so disliked by Egyptians that they literally purged his name from nearly all of their records and pretended like he had never existed.
And we do all of this while drinking and rating a custom-made cocktail specific to that week's topic.
So grab a drink, take a seat, and hang out with us each week as we learn all about history's greatest stories of controversy,
Conspiracy
and corruption.
Yeah, so we're back. So I have a question for you, Stephanie. Do you have any guesses onto why states might have started passing and enforcing these stricter laws around seatbelts?
Is it racism?
Well, probably, but that's not that's
okay.
not what
'Cause
came
I'm
up
just-
in my research.
Okay, I'm like, when in doubt, racism.
Yeah, I mean, this is America, so I'm sure it had something to do with it.
Yeah, because I'm like,
But
they
no.
love enforcing laws on certain,
Yeah.
certain people. Let's see.
Yeah.
If it's not racism,
You know what? I'm sure this did not come up in my research, but I was thinking about this when it was saying that like states had all these laws around seatbelts, but they didn't really enforce them. I was like, they probably did in Black neighborhoods. They were using it as a reason to pull people over and shit.
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, they definitely were.
Yeah, that 100% did not come up in my research, but I'm like, it's not.
But we
it's not a hard-
100% know that we know how the cops are and how
Yeah,
they
exactly.
apply laws.
Exactly. Yeah. But in the mid 80s, they started enforcing these laws for everyone, including white people.
Okay. So you're asking like what happened in the mid 80s?
If you have
Or-
any guesses, yeah, what was it about the mid 80s that like it really happened very suddenly, that like all of a sudden all these states started enforcing their laws and passing stricter laws.
I don't know.
Yeah. You wouldn't come up with the right answer.
I mean, Reagan did it.
Reagan actually tried to deregulate the power of the but then
right.
yeah this is another part of this, because it's a mini that I had to cut out of my story, that Reagan tried to deregulate the
like requirement
national highway. Yeah, exactly. But then the Supreme Court ended up stopping him and saying he couldn't do that. But so the truth is, the reason that these laws were passed and suddenly being enforced has much less to do with public safety than it does the influence of lobbyists and lawyers.
Okay.
It's a very complicated and twisty turny road.
And you thought I was going to guess that?
No, yeah. No, I knew that you wouldn't. I just wanted to know what your guesses would be.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what you might have thought it would be.
Yeah.
So,
racism.
Yeah, I mean, factual. It's a very good guess considering we're talking about something that happened in America. In 1970, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, was created to mandate uniform safety standards for highway design and automobile manufacturing. In 1973, they made a requirement that all new cars had to include a seatbelt interlock mechanism that would actually prevent a car from starting if the driver was not wearing their seatbelt.
What?
Yes. And they passed this requirement, but Americans, when they heard about this,
aggro.
Yeah. And Americans heard about this and they lost their collective shit. They were like, absolutely,
I agree with that. That's too much.
Yeah.
Even though it would save all the lives, but
I feel like today, the way people wear seatbelts and use seatbelts, it would be fine to do that. But at this time, when 14% of Americans were wearing seatbelts regularly, people were like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Congress received more letters complaining about the interlock mechanism than they did about a series of White House firings and resignations during the Watergate scandal called the Saturday Night Massacre. They were like, Saturday Night Massacre, who cares? Seatbelt requirements? Absolutely fucking not.
Yeah. So considering, like you said, 14%, that's such a strong law to have at that time. I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to get people, they're trying to force people
to do the right thing. Yeah.
To do the right thing. Yeah.
So Congress quickly swooped in and killed the interlock mechanism before it ever went into effect, because they got all this hate mail and they're like, nope, we're not doing this. But after that, the NHTSA, instead of just sort of giving up on auto safety, they decided to shift focus and start pushing for something that's called a passive restraint system. One such option for a passive restraint system is something like an airbag that would protect drivers automatically during a crash, whether they were wearing a seatbelt or not. There are other options, but the airbag was the most commonly sort of proposed.
Okay.
But airbags are way, 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 way more expensive to install than seatbelts are. So auto manufacturers started lobbying Congress to kill that requirement as well.
Oh, okay.
They're like, no, we're not going to have we're not going to have these airbags.
Yeah.
So suddenly, with the threat of these airbag requirements hanging in the air, auto manufacturers suddenly were all about seatbelt mandates. They're like, oh yeah, seatbelts, we love them. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Make everyone wear seatbelts. Yeah.
Yes, it's about the safety, not the cost savings.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah. Well, auto manufacturers suddenly were all for seatbelts. Insurance companies thought that airbag requirements were a pretty fucking great idea.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Since airbags work to save lives whether you're wearing a seatbelt or not, an airbag mandate would reduce injuries and save lives automatically, which would also save the insurance companies a fuck ton of money in claims and payouts. But over the next decade, this is through the early 70s to the early 80s, the Secretary of Transportation kept changing. Depending on whoever was in power at the time, they got to install a new Secretary of Transportation. So we went through 5 different secretaries of transportation in the course of 10 years. And every time someone new was in office, the laws surrounding seatbelt use and airbag requirements would change.
Ooh, that's chaotic.
So chaotic. And Congress was basically at war with the NHTSA, and everyone had different opinions and different loyalties depending on which industry might be lining their pockets, whether they were in bed with the auto industry or the insurance industry. So this battle was like really super complicated with tons of moving parts. I initially had like a bunch of this in my outline. I was like, there's way too much going on in here. It's kind of boring. There's a lot of moving parts and different people in play. But at the end of the day, basically all it meant was that the laws around seatbelts were changing so fast and so frequently that by the time a new law was supposed to go into effect, it was already overturned or there was already another law that superseded it. So
what were people doing in the meantime? I'm curious. Like, were they changing the way that cars were structured? Like,
no, nothing was changing because
nothing was changing.
Nothing was changing because every time there would be a new proposed law, you know, you have to give manufacturers time to like put these things into place instead of actually going forward with what they were supposed to do. The auto manufacturers are just like, let's get a new Secretary of Transportation and kill this. So we don't have to do it.
Of course. Yeah. No, that's definitely of course they did. Yes.
So after like a full decade of arguing back and forth and going nowhere and like new secretaries of transportation, blah, 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 American insurance companies decided to take matters into their own hands and do the most American thing that they could think of. They sued.
Oh my God.
Yes. In 1983, State Farm Insurance and the National Association of Independent Insurers took the federal government to court over their flip-flopping.
It.
Yeah. They're like, you can't keep flip-flopping. This is fucked up. This is ridiculous.
Has an industry ever, I don't know if you know this, but like.
I'm sure that other industries have done this.
Positive. Okay.
Yeah. This is America.
Corporate
interests. This was the 80s. Corporate industries.
Oh, yeah.
So this went to the Supreme Court, and in a unanimous opinion, the Supreme Court said that the government did not have the right to keep changing its mind. They said that to rescind a rule that they had already put into place, the government needed to have a good reason to do that. And all of these arbitrary changes back and forth were impermissible under federal law. So this put the current Secretary of Transportation at the time, Elizabeth Dole, in a very sticky situation where no matter what she decided to do, her decision was going to be really unpopular with one industry or another. She was going to piss off the auto industry or the insurance industry or these like weird libertarians that wanted to keep the government out of their car.
Yeah.
So she had to just do something. And in her search for a compromise that would keep everyone happy, she decided to require that all automobile manufacturers had to install driver's side airbags unless 2/3 of all states passed laws requiring drivers to use seatbelts by April 1st, 1989.
Okay.
So a lot of states did have seatbelt laws already, but they were really loose. They were really sort of wishy-washy. They weren't really enforced. And I don't think 2/3 of all states had them.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to ask.
Yeah. But even the ones that were in place were like really super weak. And she was like, no, they have to, like, you have to make people wear them or this isn't going to work, you know, or either make people wear seatbelts or auto manufacturers have to install airbags.
And they're not going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So to avoid the cost of having to install all of these airbags in all their new cars, all the auto industry had to do was to convince 2/3 of states in America to finally mandate seatbelt use.
Wow.
Yeah. And like
I can't believe they were the reason just to save some money, not lives, money.
Exactly. That's the thing is like this was happening around, you know, in the same era as the Pinto.
Yeah.
And we know for a fact that they were not all about that safety at all.
No, they weren't. Yeah.
The issue was they knew that airbags were even more safe than seatbelts, but they didn't want to pay for airbags because they were fucking expensive.
So this has to happen before you said 1989?
So
okay.
this happened in 1985, and she was saying
Five,
like,
okay.
you have to make this happen before April 1st, 1989, or cars have to have airbags.
Okay.
So the full influence of the American automobile industry back when they were at the height of their power
Yikes. Yeah.
descended upon state legislatures. Along with their army of lobbyists, top executives from auto manufacturers personally went state by state to twist the arms of local politicians.
Yeah.
And they could be very persuasive. They were very powerful. They had jobs. They could do, you know what I mean? Like they knew
Yeah.
exactly what to do and to say to get what they wanted. At least one company
In
that
84 was an election year, right? So they could buy some politicians?
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So at least one company that we know of implied that the location of future manufacturing plants might be influenced by which states had mandatory seatbelt laws.
Wow.
Yeah, they're like, if you don't pass this law, we're moving.
Oh my God. Oh, them. Yeah, but
Yeah,
they have all that power. So that
exactly.
I get why they were able to really move people all of a sudden
Exactly.
quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So in 1985, New York was the first state to pass and enforce one of these really strict new laws requiring seatbelt use.
Okay.
And most other states followed within just a few short years. It was literally like it happened in 85, and then 86, 87, it was like everyone was doing it. These laws were still very, very unpopular at the time, amongst all these proponents of personal freedom and that kind
I mean,
of
who
shit.
cares what the people want
Exactly.
is kind of the wave here always.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
we
It's
want
not
gun
about
laws, and yet here we are.
Yeah. If something happened where the NRA had to either like have stricter safety standards or something else, all of a sudden common sense gun reform across the board.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
Yeah. But so these new laws were really unpopular, but now that they were being enforced, they were also very effective, finally, for like the first time ever, because we were actually enforcing them. There were actual officers out on the highway pulling people over if they weren't wearing their seatbelt for the first time in history. In New York State, seatbelt compliance increased to 70% in less than a year after the law was passed.
Wow.
Like,
that's crazy.
Yeah. To go from less than 20% to over 70% in like 6 months or whatever.
I'm rolling my eyes so hard right now.
Yeah. By 1989, all but 8 states in the country had passed new seatbelt legislation. And today, New Hampshire, whose license plates proclaim live free or die, remains the only state in the country that does not have a mandatory seatbelt law.
Really?
Yes. There's no mandatory seatbelt law in New Hampshire. But the weirdest part of this whole story to me is that despite the fact that we have a Secretary of Transportation, we have all of these different highway safety administrations and all this shit, there still is no federal requirement to wear a seatbelt. The only law we ever passed around seatbelts is making auto manufacturers install them. But there's no federal law that mandates that people have to wear them.
There's only state laws.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is why New Hampshire doesn't have to enforce
of course.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
States' rights.
Yes, exactly.
Huh. Okay.
Don't tread on me.
Oh my God, they're so silly. I would love to see their auto deaths.
I know. Seriously. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think to look into that. Oh, I should have done that.
Yeah,
I need to build a Mini on my Mini.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Huh. Wow, big business really runs this shit.
Literally, yeah. The only reason that people wear seatbelts is because auto manufacturers didn't want to pay for airbags.
Mess.
It's so ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's the story.
Okay. Yeah, that was really good. And I could see how this could be a full episode if you were able to really like go down those roads that you mentioned.
Totally. When I first started researching it, I was like, oh, this will be easy. This, like, I don't have to do
Yeah.
that much research. Seatbelt laws. How hard could it be? What could one banana cost?
Yes.
But then I was like, oh shit. And like my outline just kept growing and growing and growing. And then I got to a point where I was like, no. This is a mini.
Yes.
Cut this shit down.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for sharing that story. Good God. I'm like so angry.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's good that we have seatbelt. I mean, it is good that we have seatbelt laws statewide, but wow, the reason for it is trash.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like, older people have a much harder time sort of like remembering to put it on. My mom even still gets in the
Really?
car and forgets to put her seatbelt on sometimes. And I always have to be like, Mom, put your fucking seatbelt on.
Oh, okay. Because, yeah, she was in the before times.
Yeah. I mean, barely. She was like in her 20s.
Yeah, your mom is young, like younger than my mom. I recently learned that my mom grew up when she was in Alabama with no electricity or indoor plumbing.
Holy shit.
And I'm like, what did you do at night? She's like, we went to sleep. I'm like, oh.
No.
What?
Nighttime. Okay. Nighttime isn't for sleeping. It's for binging Netflix.
Yeah. Like what? Like what? Crazy.
That's
nuts. She's seen some things.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's my story. Buckle up, everyone.
Truly. Yeah. Even you listeners in New Hampshire, be more like Vermont, okay?
Right? Yes. Yeah.
So my drink is basically empty. Were you even drinking?
Water.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. Stay hydrated. Look at you. So
trying to be safe over here.
I'm not mad at it. Hydration is very important. And I know that means that I'm old. The fact that I can say that with a straight face.
Yes.
Hydration is very important. What? Oh my God, I sound like dust. Anyway, so thank you so much for listening to Beyond Reproach. This has been Stephanie Domingo.
And Tex Lerzel.
Thank you to our new audio editor, Dev. We cannot do this without him. We love him. We appreciate him. Thank you.
Absolutely. Trying to do this without him would be unsafe.
It would. Truly. All right.
Okay, guys. Thanks so much.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Beyond Reproach. Please note that we are not historians. We're just a couple of drunks who never shut up and love history. A full list of all source information can be found in the show notes on our website. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. Written reviews are especially important. If you like us, please do one of two things. Leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts or send this episode to a friend, family member, or someone who you think would be into it. Don't forget to follow us on social media and make sure you follow us on Instagram because we post our cocktail recipes the Thursday before each full episode. Please drink along with us if you are not driving. We also have a shop on beyondreproachpod.com. Get your merch, brand yourselves. And we also have exclusive content on Patreon where you can directly support the production of our show.